The Atacama Desert stretches along northern Chile like a landscape unfinished by water. Mountains rise without vegetation, their slopes cut by wind and time rather than rivers. Rain rarely falls here. In some areas, decades pass without measurable precipitation. The ground holds salt, copper, and iron beneath a surface hardened into pale dust and fractured stone. Morning arrives slowly across the desert plateau. Light spreads without obstruction, revealing long distances and very little movement. Sound carries differently in this dryness. Machinery can be heard from far away, then disappears again into stillness once engines stop. The air remains thin and clear, shaped by altitude and distance from the sea. Mining towns exist as interruptions rather than settlements. Roads connect processing plants, storage yards, and narrow entrances carved into hillsides. Buildings are practical, temporary in appearance, built for function rather than permanence. Workers arrive before sunrise and leave as daylight fades, following schedules dictated by shifts rather than seasons. The San José Mine lay within this environment, several dozen kilometers from the coastal city of Copiapó. Its entrance opened into a mountain already hollowed by decades of extraction. Trucks moved in and out carrying rock that would later be crushed and sorted for copper and gold. Above ground, activity was ordinary and repetitive. Dust lifted briefly behind passing vehicles and settled again within minutes. From a distance, nothing suggested urgency. The desert remained quiet, unchanged by human routine. Beneath the surface, tunnels extended downward through layers of unstable rock, unseen from the open sky. The landscape gave no indication of what existed below it. The mining region surrounding Copiapó had long depended on mineral extraction. Copper and gold shaped the local economy, drawing generations of workers into the desert interior. Employment followed the rhythm of global metal prices. When demand rose, mines reopened. When it fell, operations slowed or closed, only to begin again later under new ownership. The San José Mine was one of the older sites in northern Chile. First developed in the 19th century, it had passed through several operators over decades. By 2010, it functioned as a medium-scale copper and gold mine, smaller than the massive industrial operations elsewhere in the country but still employing dozens of men on rotating shifts. Work continued despite repeated closures caused by accidents and financial difficulty. The mountain contained valuable ore, and reopening it was often considered economically necessary. The miners themselves came from varied backgrounds but shared similar working lives. Many were experienced laborers who had spent years moving between mines across the Atacama region. Some had followed fathers or older relatives into the profession. Others arrived after employment in construction or transport became unreliable. Mining offered steady wages compared with other work available in the desert towns. Their days followed structure. Workers gathered before dawn, boarded transport vehicles, and entered the mine together. Underground labor required coordination and trust. Operators controlled heavy drilling machines. Others reinforced tunnels, loaded rock, or drove trucks through narrow passages cut deep into the mountain. Conditions were physically demanding. Temperatures increased with depth, and ventilation systems struggled to keep air circulating through older sections of the mine. Safety concerns were not unfamiliar to them. Rockfalls occurred periodically in many mines throughout the region. Workers learned to read small signs, falling dust, shifting sounds within the rock, or cracks forming along tunnel walls. Experience created routine caution rather than fear. Each shift assumed risk as part of ordinary work. On the morning of August 5, 2010, 33 men descended into the mine for their scheduled shift. Their ages ranged from young laborers in their 20s to older miners nearing retirement. Some had decades underground. Others were relatively new but trained in standard procedures. They carried food intended for a normal workday, tools assigned to their tasks, and expectations shaped by repetition. Above ground, families continued daily routines. The desert towns functioned as they always had. Shops opened, buses ran between neighborhoods, and dust moved slowly across empty streets. The mine operated without public attention. No unusual weather approached. No warning reached the surface. Inside the mountain, tunnels extended more than 600 meters below ground level, connected by ramps spiraling downward toward active extraction zones. The miners traveled deeper as part of their assignments that morning, moving equipment and preparing sections scheduled for blasting and hauling. Nothing in those early hours separated the day from countless others that had come before. Work progressed according to plan. Engines echoed through the rock, then faded as vehicles passed into distant corridors. The structure of the mine held, as it had for years. The routine continued until the stability of the mountain changed without visible notice. Shortly before mid-afternoon on August 5, 2010, movement began deep within the mountain. At first it resembled sounds familiar to experienced miners, distant cracking, the shifting pressure of rock adjusting along fault lines created by excavation. Such noises were common enough that work did not immediately stop. Then the vibration intensified. A massive rockfall occurred within the upper levels of the mine. Hundreds of thousands of tons of stone broke loose and collapsed through connecting tunnels, generating a force that traveled downward like a sudden storm contained inside the earth. Dust filled the air, reducing visibility to darkness. Equipment shook violently. The sound continued for minutes, echoing through the shafts long after the initial collapse. The primary access ramp, the only route large enough for vehicles to exit, was buried under debris. Secondary escape ladders were also destroyed as falling rock severed passageways above the miners' position. Communication lines failed almost immediately. The 33 men gathered at a refuge area approximately 700 meters below the surface and several kilometers from the mine entrance. This chamber, originally intended as a temporary safety point, contained limited emergency supplies but was not designed to sustain workers for extended confinement. At first, uncertainty remained. Rockfalls sometimes blocked tunnels temporarily, and rescue crews often cleared debris within hours. The miners attempted to drive vehicles upward along the ramp but soon encountered impassable walls of collapsed stone. Dust continued to fall from ceilings, signaling instability above them. As time passed, attempts to locate alternative exits revealed the same result. Every known route to the surface had been sealed. Airflow weakened. The scale of the collapse became clear not through announcement, but through absence: no communication, no sound of machinery from above, no incoming rescue teams. The realization formed gradually. The mountain had closed behind them. In the hours following the collapse, the miners remained gathered near the refuge chamber. Dust settled slowly, revealing the limits of the space available to them. The chamber measured only a small fraction of the tunnels surrounding it, reinforced but never intended for long habitation. Heat rose steadily from the surrounding rock. Temperatures approached 30 degrees Celsius, and humidity increased as ventilation weakened. The refuge contained emergency rations meant to last a short period, small quantities of canned tuna, milk, crackers, and a limited water supply. The amount assumed rescue within days, not weeks. Inventory was counted carefully. Calculations were made without discussion of worst outcomes. Food was divided into portions measured in spoonfuls rather than meals. Leadership formed without formal assignment. Shift foreman Luis Urzua coordinated organization, relying on experience managing underground crews. Responsibilities were distributed. Some men monitored lighting systems powered by vehicle batteries. Others inspected nearby tunnels for hazards or possible airflow. A small group maintained strict control over food storage to prevent accidental overconsumption. Time quickly lost its normal structure. Without sunlight, days were marked by routine rather than clocks. Sleep occurred in shifts on the ground or inside parked vehicles. Noise was minimized to conserve energy. Water seepage along rock walls became an important resource. Drops collected in containers provided additional hydration when supplies ran low. The miners established rules early. No individual would eat outside scheduled distribution. Arguments were discouraged, not through authority but through shared necessity. The confined space required cooperation. Personal privacy disappeared, replaced by collective survival. Physical conditions demanded adaptation. The air remained heavy with dust and diesel residue. Clothing became damp from heat and sweat. Hygiene deteriorated as washing water was unavailable. Despite discomfort, movement continued daily. Walking through nearby tunnels prevented stiffness and allowed men to monitor structural changes in the rock. Light came primarily from helmet lamps and vehicle headlights. Batteries were conserved carefully. Long periods passed in near darkness to preserve power. Conversation filled some of the silence, often focused on ordinary subjects, families, previous jobs, memories of towns above ground. Routine discussion helped maintain a sense of continuity with life outside the mine. After several days without contact, uncertainty deepened. The miners understood that rescue operations above ground might not yet know their location or survival status. Past mining accidents in the region had ended without successful recovery. The possibility of being presumed dead existed, though it was not openly stated. Rationing intensified. Each man received approximately 2 spoonfuls of tuna, a small sip of milk, and a fragment of cracker every 48 hours. Hunger became constant but manageable. The body adapted slowly to reduced intake, conserving energy as activity decreased. The refuge chamber was reorganized repeatedly. Sleeping areas shifted to improve airflow. Waste zones were designated farther down and used tunnels to limit contamination. Simple routines, waking, inspection walks, ration distribution, rest, formed a predictable cycle that replaced ordinary timekeeping. Psychological stability required equal attention. Some miners withdrew into silence for long periods. Others spoke frequently, maintaining conversation to prevent isolation. The group avoided speculation about outcomes. Instead, focus remained on immediate tasks, maintaining order, preserving resources, and waiting. 17 days passed in this manner. Above ground, drilling operations searched for signs of life, though the miners could not hear them clearly through layers of rock. Underground, faint sounds occasionally traveled through the tunnels, distant vibrations difficult to interpret. Each noise suggested possibility but provided no confirmation. On August 22, a drill bit finally broke through into the chamber area. The sudden appearance of metal piercing the ceiling confirmed that rescuers had located them. The miners attached a written note to the drill, "Estamos bien en el refugio los 33." The message was brief, factual, and written in red ink. For the first time since the collapse, certainty replaced isolation. Communication tubes soon followed. Through narrow boreholes, rescuers sent water, food supplements, medicine, and letters from families. The miners responded with reports about health conditions and requests for equipment. Nutrition improved gradually as carefully planned diets were introduced to restore strength without overwhelming weakened bodies. Daily life adjusted again. Medical instructions arrived from doctors on the surface. Exercise routines were established to maintain muscle function. Lighting schedules simulated day and night cycles. Psychologists advised maintaining structured activity to prevent mental decline. The underground environment remained unchanged, hot, confined, and dark, but survival shifted from emergency endurance to sustained management. The miners organized work assignments even without traditional labor. Some cleaned living areas. Others documented events using cameras sent from above. Religious services and group meetings occurred regularly, providing shared focus. Days accumulated into weeks. The rescue effort above ground expanded into an international operation involving engineers, drilling specialists, and medical teams. Underground, the men followed progress reports delivered through communication lines. They learned of multiple drilling plans working simultaneously to reach them. Despite improved supplies, challenges continued. Sleep remained irregular. The absence of natural light affected perception of time. Physical discomfort persisted. Yet routine held the group together. Survival depended less on individual strength than on maintaining order within limited space. By the second month underground, adaptation had become habitual. Movements slowed to conserve energy. Conversations became quieter. Anticipation of rescue existed alongside uncertainty about how long drilling would require. The mountain remained silent around them, unchanged by human expectation. Above, machines worked continuously. Below, 33 men waited within a system they had built themselves, structured, disciplined, and sustained by cooperation rather than hope alone. As September progressed, the passage of time became more difficult to measure. Supplies from the surface arrived regularly through narrow boreholes, yet the miners remained confined within the same limited environment. The improvement in food and medical care stabilized their physical condition, but confinement introduced new forms of strain. Sleep patterns fractured despite structured lighting schedules. Some men remained awake long after designated rest periods, while others slept excessively. Without natural temperature change or sunlight, the body lost familiar cues. Headaches, skin infections, and digestive problems became common. Doctors on the surface monitored symptoms through daily reports, adjusting diets and sending medication when possible. Psychological pressure increased in quieter ways. The early urgency of survival had passed, replaced by prolonged waiting. Rescue timelines changed repeatedly as drilling encountered harder rock than expected. Plans announced one week were revised the next. Information reached the miners carefully, filtered to avoid discouragement, but uncertainty remained evident. The confined space intensified interpersonal tension. Minor disagreements emerged over noise, sleeping areas, or routine responsibilities. Leadership worked to resolve conflicts quickly, emphasizing cooperation. Group meetings became more frequent, allowing grievances to be expressed openly before resentment deepened. Maintaining unity required continuous effort. Physical movement was limited to short walks through nearby tunnels. Muscles weakened despite exercise programs. Several miners reported dizziness when standing quickly. Medical teams instructed them to practice gradual conditioning in preparation for eventual extraction, warning that sudden exposure to the surface environment could cause complications. Above ground, international attention grew. Engineers from multiple countries collaborated on drilling operations, operating around the clock. 3 separate drilling plans advanced simultaneously, each attempting to create a shaft wide enough for rescue. Underground, the miners followed progress through updates delivered by communication lines. Every report described distance remaining rather than completion achieved. The sense of distance from ordinary life deepened. Letters from families arrived daily, describing events continuing without them, school routines, birthdays, changing seasons. The information reassured but also emphasized separation. Some miners limited how often they read messages, finding the contrast difficult to manage. Time blurred into repetition. Meals arrived at scheduled intervals. Medical checks occurred. Cameras occasionally recorded footage sent to the surface, showing organized living areas and group activities. These recordings reassured families and officials but did not alter conditions below. By early October, exhaustion appeared less as physical collapse and more as quiet fatigue. Conversations shortened. Long silences became common. The miners understood rescue was progressing, yet the duration had exceeded any initial expectation. Survival no longer depended on emergency adaptation but on patience sustained over weeks without visible change. The mountain remained closed around them, offering no indication of how near the surface truly was. In early October 2010, drilling teams working under what became known as Plan B advanced steadily toward the refuge level. The drill, operated from the surface above the San José Mine, cut through layers of hard volcanic rock that had slowed previous attempts. Progress was measured in meters per day. Each update transmitted underground reduced the remaining distance by small increments. On October 9, the drill finally broke through into the miner's chamber. The sound arrived first as a distant vibration, then as a sudden burst of dust and falling fragments from above. The opening confirmed that a shaft wide enough for extraction could now be reinforced and prepared. For the miners, the change was practical rather than emotional. New instructions followed immediately, physical conditioning would intensify, and procedures for ascent would begin. Engineers widened the borehole to approximately 66 centimeters in diameter, enough to allow passage of a specially designed rescue capsule later named Phoenix. Medical teams coordinated closely with those underground. Each miner underwent daily health evaluations. Weight, heart rate, hydration, and psychological condition were monitored carefully. The order of extraction was planned according to medical and operational criteria rather than seniority. Training began below ground. The men practiced entering confined spaces and wearing harness systems that would stabilize them during ascent. They were instructed on breathing techniques and emergency procedures in case the capsule stopped during its journey upward. Sunglasses were provided to protect eyes unaccustomed to sunlight after more than 2 months in darkness. On October 13, 69 days after the collapse, the rescue operation began shortly after midnight local time. One by one, miners entered the capsule. The ascent took approximately 15 minutes, traveling through a narrow shaft lined with steel casing to prevent collapse. At the surface, medical personnel received each man immediately for examination. The process remained orderly and continuous. There were no pauses between extractions beyond necessary technical checks. Families waited nearby, but procedures prioritized health assessments and stabilization before reunions. Throughout the day and into the following hours, all 33 miners were brought to the surface alive. The final extraction occurred late on October 13, concluding the operation without loss of life during rescue. The mine entrance remained surrounded by equipment and personnel even after the last ascent. Activity slowed gradually as machinery powered down. The mountain, unchanged in appearance, stood silent again beneath the desert sky. In the days following the rescue, the miners were transported to hospitals in the region surrounding Copiapó for observation. Most showed signs of weight loss, muscle weakening, and minor infections, conditions expected after prolonged confinement. Medical teams monitored vision, cardiovascular stability, and psychological health. Recovery was gradual rather than immediate. Public attention extended far beyond northern Chile. The rescue had been followed worldwide, yet for the men involved, adjustment to ordinary life proved complex. Sleep patterns remained irregular. Some reported discomfort in open spaces after weeks spent underground. Others returned slowly to family routines interrupted by absence measured not in days but in nearly 10 weeks. Investigations later examined the structural condition of the mine and the decisions that allowed work to continue despite previous safety concerns. The San José Mine did not reopen. Its tunnels remained sealed, leaving the site as a reminder of both risk and survival within an industry shaped by uncertainty beneath the earth. The event entered mining history as one of the longest successful underground survivals ever recorded. It demonstrated the role of discipline, organization, and coordinated rescue rather than individual endurance alone. 33 men survived not through dramatic action, but through sustained cooperation under conditions that allowed little margin for error. Across the Atacama Desert, wind continued to move dust across the same quiet landscape. From the surface, nothing revealed the weeks spent below. The desert returned to stillness, holding the memory without visible trace.